Welcome to the Future of Less Work, where we're piecing together the transformation of work one conversation at a time. I'm Nirit Cohen, and today's episode explores one of the biggest questions looming over the future of work. In a world where jobs are increasingly embedded with technology, what remains uniquely human? Every major shift in work begins with a quiet trade-off. We build machines to make life easier, then they take over things that we used to do. And as AI is doing just that and taking over not just what we do, but how we do it, creativity, decisions, communication, the real question isn't how fast technology will move, it's how deeply we'll remember what makes us human. Joe Hart, CEO of Dale Carnegie, and Matt Britton, CEO of Suzy and author of Generation AI, recently partnered to launch Human by Design, a program that helps people future-proof themselves in an AI-driven world. I invited them to join me to explore what that means. Joe, Matt, welcome to the Future of Less Work.
Great to see you, Nirit. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. So, how do we future-proof ourselves in an AI-driven world? Matt?
Well, I think the world has changed in that the future success in business relies upon far less about how to solve the problem and far more about being adept at identifying the problems that need to be solved. AI is basically built, in my opinion, to start to signal the end of the knowledge economy. For so many years, people in work were successful by their ability to memorize and regurgitate content in the form factor of a variety of different roles. But that is exactly what AI is trained and built to do. Instead, it's those soft skills like creativity and problem solving and critical thinking that are now far more elevated because we have this powerful new tool. And the biggest challenge is really understanding how to deploy it in order to drive growth and innovation for businesses.
Okay, so Joe, I'm going to just keep asking one more question before I turn this to you. I have to ask you this. One of the things that I wonder about, because you said, the end of the knowledge economy, and yes, the machines are now thinking for us, right? But doesn't what we ask them depend on the knowledge and experience we've accumulated? And can we continue to ask the right questions if we don't have that knowledge?
So let me clarify something. I don't think AI is thinking for us. And that's not what I meant by the end of the knowledge economy, because knowledge and thinking are two separate things. Knowledge is in my opinion, is the retention and deployment of facts and information. Thinking is critical deployment in terms of how to deploy, leverage, and utilize those facts and information. So if you look at, for example, graphic design, AI has the knowledge of how to design almost anything, but it still takes a human to point it in the right direction, with an underlying human insight to make something that people will find valuable and useful that will ultimately has some type of human benefit or business impact. And I think that's the distinction.
Okay, awesome. So Joe, what are those human skills or capabilities that make us uniquely human and give us the edge?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because everything that Matt said is right? So we've got this technology, people are using it. And of course, there's a mindset around that. I mean, am I open to doing it? Right now, there's a lot of fear around AI and so forth. So, part of it is, creativity, it's listening, it's influence, it's communication. I think about leadership, Nirit. I mean, in terms of even just, there's a whole challenge about deploying AI in the workplace. Many people are afraid and so forth. So how do you create trust? All of these human power skills, if you will, are things that people are really going to have to focus on even more in the years to come as AI becomes more and more prevalent, dominant, whatever you might want to say.
Are they different from what we used to consider leadership skills? Because we've been telling leaders they need to, have the human aspect of not just the kind of the to-do of the knowledge work, right? So I get the fear is rising, but are the needs for the skills different?
I think the needs are greater now. I think this is one of the greatest change management things impacting the workplace. I think about how COVID impacted the workplace and how people had to adapt very quickly. In many ways, we're watching change happen before us. And frankly, we look at organizations, and you could have two organizations right now, one that will thrive and one that won't. And a lot of that will come down to leadership. So the importance, the critical importance of leadership, transparency, of interpersonal skills, those kinds of things are really essential. Again, I think leadership matters, and it matters more now than ever. So some of the skills I think are going to become even more if we look down even at the individual level, Nirit. Going back to what Matt was saying, and there's certain things that the machines are going to be able to do very effectively. I think about in sales, for example. There's no excuse for a salesperson to come unprepared for a meeting. They should know more about their prospect. They should really not come asking silly questions. They've got to get better at asking questions. They've got to get better at empathy. They've got to get better at listening. All those kinds of skills have always been important in sales, and they're going to be even more important in the future as people are comparing different salespeople coming in to meet with them. What's the quality of that person? What are the skills that person brings versus somebody else?
Yeah. So Matt, I see you nodding, right? We talk about this AI literacy and the way that we need to, I don't know if upskill is the right word, but basically teach ourselves these new capabilities.
Yep. Absolutely. I think there are different skill sets that are more important now than ever before that will allow people who can adopt them and deploy them to be 10 times more effective. When you think about how young people are educated, and I mentioned this earlier, it is largely about memorization and regurgitation, right? What makes you be a good student? It's cramming as much information in your brain and spitting it back out. And that's kind of akin to today's software engineer or accountant understanding how to do someone's taxes and spitting it back out. I think AI is going to be able to do people's taxes, but why will people need accountants? They're going to need accountants to have a trusted partner to understand financial planning and understand if they're making the right decisions and if they're looking at saving the right way towards their big goals in life. Those are completely different skills. And I would argue those skills are not the skills that are being taught to tomorrow's leaders. And that's where I think we're going to have the biggest skills gap moving forward.
Okay, so before we go to the learning, right? There's a step before that actually asks, will we need an accountant? And what I mean by that is we actually see the data these days in organizations and in the market, right? Where we're almost exchanging technology for people, and we've stopped hiring certain people and we've let go of a whole lot of people. So the fear is substantiated. There's an assumption there that the tools can do my work, large portions of it, and the organizations or maybe, the job market will need less people. What do you think to that?
Right. So I think what's going to happen in the short term is you're right. There's going to be a lot of job displacement because I think, they say the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed. But where it is distributed is with big tech. And you saw Amazon just last week part ways with 15,000 employees. And they're experiencing what I think a lot of mainstream corporate America, if you will figure out in the next 6 to 12 months. And I think in the short term, especially in the wake with what I think is really alarming economic news, not from people who can afford to invest in the stock market, but from the rest of America, is there's a lot of struggle out there. For example, delinquencies on car loans are at an all-time high. So I think those two things combined in the short term create a pretty scary environment for the job market. But I do think over time, what will happen is these companies will become far more efficient through AI, and they're going to have far more free cash flow to redeploy. And the optimist in me says that will create new jobs. There are stats that saying 80% of the new jobs created by the year 2030 just don't exist yet. So there will be a range of new jobs that don't exist today. The question is, can the people who are displaced, to your point earlier, upskill to fill those roles? Because, if AI does its job right, if you talk about companies cutting 15% of costs, that will have a massive impact on our GDP and productivity, which ultimately should be better for all citizens. The risk is, disparagement in wealth, or disparity in wealth, rather, between the haves and the have-nots. And that's what we really need to avoid, which is why I think training is so very critical at this early stage.
Yes, exactly. And I think, I called this podcast The Future of Less Work, not because I think there's less work, but we should be doing less of what doesn't matter and more of what does. So kind of circling to, will an accountant have a job? I think a lot of it has to do with, can they reinvent themselves? Can they create value that somebody will pay for in some new format, maybe with some new titles and words around it, right? I don't know if they're accountant. And so, John, that circles right back to training.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting, Nirit, because I think about the two accountants, right? So what are the skills that will be more important when the actual work of preparing the tax return are essentially the same. It really then becomes the skill of the accountant interacting with the person who is receiving the tax return or is going to submit it to the government. So do I trust this person? Does this person communicate clearly? Do I understand? Do they listen to me? Do they ask questions that, really to get to know me better? So the accountant who can do those things is going to be more successful than the accountant who can't. And going back to the point that you made, and I think that Matt was highlighting about job displacement, if the firm is looking at two potential people and they say, geez, we may only need one, who are they going to keep? They're going to keep the person who's got the skills to interact with the client. I think about the same thing with the doctor. Matt, one of the things that Matt shared with me was he's created this health bot, right? And I've kind of done a lot of the same type of thing, put a lot into AI, ask a lot of those kinds of things. At the end of the day, I still want to talk to a doctor. I want to validate those kinds of things. And so does the doctor have the interpersonal skills, the empathy, or the ability to communicate and ask questions? So those are some of the skills. Those are some of the kinds of skills I think that are going to become even more important in the years ahead. We're going to look for that. We're going to crave that kind of that human connection.
Do you think we understand what that is? What is the uniquely human value add that we bring into work?
Well, a lot of it, I think, is context. It's the understanding of things that maybe AI doesn't. We talk about maybe street smarts, versus book smarts. There may be technical knowledge that you have that AI has, but then you've got the practical application of it. I mean, I've had the experience of asking things to AI, and I've said, this just doesn't seem right. There's inaccuracies and things that we have to validate. I was getting ready to give a toast to the Dale Carnegie Board of Directors for a dinner. And I said to ChatGPT, give me a really good Dale Carnegie quote about teamwork. And it gave me a really good quote, but it wasn't from Dale Carnegie. It was actually from Andrew Carnegie. And I said to it, this is from Andrew Carnegie. And we got into a little bit of a tiff,
Got into a fight with ChatGPT.
What's that?
Said you got into a fight with ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was friendly, it was cordial, but
right.
But the point is, I mean, there are things that we as humans are still going to have to do. We're going to have to evaluate. We're going to have to be analytical. We're going to have creative and social and emotional intelligence. We're going to. I mean, as long as AI is not doing all of the work, and as long as there are people, I mean, everything comes down to relationship. How do we interact with each other? Is there is there trust? So those kinds of skills are going to continue to be, I think, again, even more important maybe than they have been in the past. Always important, to your first point, Nirit, I think about, hey, aren't these things always, they always have been. And again, as things change and AI rolls out and becomes even more predominant, we're going to be in the spotlight individually, which is why individuals need to take ownership of their own self-development. And companies need to invest in their development. It's got to be a partnership. And that partnership then creates a level of trust. I've got the organization's got my back. I'm going to step up. So that's one way that people can grow together in an organization.
So Matt, you talked about not the content of the training, but how education and training need to change. And I think about this. There used to be like this one answer. The professor would tell you the answer, right? You learned it and then you got an A on your exam because you were able to repeat it. And that is no longer true. And so how should we learn when not just the answers out there, but maybe even the right questions to ask are not quite clear yet?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the best analogy is like it used to be learning was here's a coloring page, color inside the lines, and anything outside the lines is wrong. But that is exactly what AI is trained to do, is color inside the lines. I think the new way to teach is allowing the student, no matter how old they are, to question like, should these lines even exist? Where can I move the lines to? And not be bound by coloring inside the lines. And more importantly, understand why even color at all, right? Is there a better way for me to stylize this image, whatever it may be? That is a completely different way of thinking, because it goes from listening and following directions and putting your head down in a very deterministic form factor to having a much more autonomous way of looking at problems and the world. And I think if you make that analogy to employees, people who come into work every day and wait to be told what to do are the people who are most at risk. People who come into work every day and see problems that need solving, and that's kind of the cloud, so to speak, and then can be in the dirt, understanding how to put their hands on keyboard and solve those problems, right? And avoiding the middle. Those are the people who employers increasingly want to hire. And those are the people who are going to be able to 10x their value moving forward.
So here's the challenge, because I spent 3 decades inside the organization, right? And we put people in boxes, right? We tell you, here's your job. These are your roles and responsibilities. This is the guy that tells you what to do. These people, you tell them what to do. We actually tell them, you think within these boundaries, right?
Tell people to color inside the lines, right?
Well, we give them the coloring paper, right? So, sometimes we accept, someone to kind of bring out a piece of paper of their own because they drew something we didn't expect, but we still give them these guidelines, and we call them guidelines. You can go outside the lines, but you need to ask for permission. And I wonder whether, going back to Joe, to your comment on the guy doing the taxes, or actually both of you talked about this, right? Maybe people actually will gain from becoming creators, from not necessarily taking that next step within the organization, or, Amazon figuring out they have now capital and they create new roles. But the people that have been let go, that they ask themselves, so what do I know how to do? Who needs this? And how do I repackage it?
100%. I mean, I think the barriers to entry to creating your own business right now are lower than ever before. I have a software company and we raised over $100 million, and we deployed the majority of that to build software, which today can be built by 1 or 2 people using today's latest AI technology. And I think that just illustrates the opportunity. And not everyone is going to be enterprising in that form and take initiative to be able to start their own business. But for those who can, it is the best time possible to be an entrepreneur, to be able to have initiative, to have an idea and execute. A lot of people, I feel, have an imposter syndrome, like they don't feel like it's their right to do it. And, I think empowering people to understand it is their right to do it. You look at, and this started with COVID, and you looked at remote work, and, for the first time ever, you didn't need to be in an office. Look at us. We're having this interview all in different places. And now you have all these cloud-based and AI-powered tools that allow you to perform the work where in the past you needed a department to execute. So that will be another, I think, benefit and boom of the AI world, is this notion of the solopreneur, an individual that can create a company of one that can create a ton of value.
Yeah,
Nirit,
exactly. Yep, go ahead.
I just want to go back. I mean, I agree with everything that Matt said. And part of what your point is that within an organization, people are expected to work within a certain framework. And if we think about just organizational change over decades, right? It used to be much more command and control, and it started to shift. And now we're at the point where there's not a CEO I talk to who doesn't say, I have to have a more bold, agile organization. I mean, because the CEO knows that the world is changing so quickly. If my organization can't change at least as fast as the world is, hopefully faster, we may not be here. So everyone's under pressure. Every executive team's under pressure. That means then the people have to be more agile. And going back to the coloring page, it's like we need people to think creatively. We need people to ask the right questions. We need people to take the initiative and to be bold. And that can only happen in an environment where leadership is creating the psychological safety, the place for people to feel comfortable to speak up, where it's being rewarded. And frankly, in this world, I mean, in 5 years, the world's going to be so much different, I think, even than it is right now. I mean, we're going to look back at 25, 26 and say, wow, those were defining years in the world of work. So agility is absolutely critical. So I think more and more part of what AI is going to do is even accelerate that transformation, where we've got to rely more on individuals to take action and to take initiative. Because frankly, we're all going to depend on that. We need people to be able to think and to be bold and to be agile and to be creative and to be able to communicate.
The issue is a lot of people feel like they need permission to take initiative. I think that goes to what you were saying earlier is, that people are trained, to basically just wait for the order to come in before.
Yeah, we have a command and control structure in organizations, right?
That's exactly right. And I think when you look at, maybe underprivileged populations, I think more so even with them, they feel like, minorities don't feel like they have the right to actually take initiative, because they feel like they need to be a product of the system. So I think when you talk about wealth disparity, there's a real risk of AI empowering the wealthy and really pushing the minority groups and people who are underserved even further down on the wealth disparity scale. And I think it's a big risk moving forward that we all need to acknowledge.
So what would you do from I don't know if a social perspective is the right one to ask, right? But I think the changes are happening at so many layers, and we can tell people, go ahead and, upskill yourself. Don't wait for the organization to do it. We can tell organizations, you need to figure out how to bring in agility. You need to retrain your managers for a different type of motivational, I call them the motivational paycheck elements, right? What should we do at kind of broader levels, education, social systems?
Well, I think it starts with yourself. I think a lot of people who work at organizations are taught to be able to, or told to upskill in the world of AI. But when they go on the work, it's not like they can download any tool that they want because there's IT and data security concerns. They can't start uploading customer data. So the reality is they are quite encumbered in their ability to really become an AI expert in the workplace. So what I tell people to do when I speak around AI all around the world is I tell people, create your own tools, build your own health bot, build a fitness or financial management bot or AI application at home where you can do so in an unencumbered fashion and get those hands-on skills that one day when your workplace catches up, you will be able to apply there. I think as a parent, what I'm doing as a parent of small children is making sure that I'm focusing more on creativity, that I'm not telling them to just color inside the lines, that I'm allowing them to make up their own stories and come up with interesting ideas, and I can show them pictures of videos of and allow their dreams come to life to show them and kind of retrain their brains that anything is possible. So when they have the ability to actually put this to work, no matter what age they are, they're going to be a step ahead. I think educators need to do the same thing. And I think employers need to do the same thing to be able to future-proof their companies.
Yeah, and I think, Joe, one of the really interesting challenges, also for you guys these days, is what are the leadership skills? Because it feels to me that in a world where people manage AI agents, a lot of what we used to call management skills are now basic skills, because I have, as an individual, I need to delegate, I need to define success, and I need to assess the work of something that wasn't me, right? And then what happens to managers when they're leading these teams that are combined technology and people? And oh, by the way, people are dispersed and they're all over the place, right?
Yeah, I mean, so many of the skills, this goes back even to your first point, and many of the skills I think are still the same. There's a depth or development of the skills that are really important. I mean, communication is more important maybe today than it's ever been. Why? Because we've got to build trust. And how do I build trust? It's how I communicate, how I come off. Am I consistent and so forth? So, I mean, you've got those kinds of things that people really need to continue to work on developing. But at the end of the day, you're right. You might have AI agents talking to AI agents, but where are people in the mix? As long as people are in the mix, one-on-one groups, it's all about relationship, and trust underlies relationship. And the question is, how do I build that? Am I credible? Do people believe me? Do they trust me? Do they want to listen to me? Will they follow? Can I influence thinking and so forth, and direction? Organizational.
And those are very different tools. I mean, the word trust is still the word trust, but we used to build trust by walking into the office, walking the corridors, handshake and eye contact. Today, it could be, these boxes on videos, but you can also be an avatar, and it could be my avatar talking to your avatar. And are you, is this a real thing, or is this so what does it mean to build trust?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, again, I'm still thinking on a people by people basis. You're right. The environment in which we're connecting right now is different. We can't see full body. We can't see and so forth. And AI agents interacting with AI agents, I guess I'm not going to go there from a people standpoint. Yeah. What I will say is that, the expectation of leaders today is different than it was if we go back even 10 or 20 years. There's greater transparency in terms of leadership. You've got social things like Glassdoor and other types of things that create visibility. So and people really crave that connection and that reliability to leaders. So part of this is, how am I leading? Am I doing the things that I say I'm going to do? For example, even if we're going to talk about an AI initiative, am I being transparent with the organization about what's happening and why and where it's going, and what my commitment is to upskilling the team? And then am I following it? Do people see that? Because that relationship, Matt was talking about his kids. One thing I've always said to my kids is that trust is a super hard thing to gain and a really, really easy thing to lose, and maybe even more than ever in the workforce. So again, as leaders, and I'm not just talking about C-level leaders, as managers, because so much of engagement or disengagement is connected to the supervisor. Am I transparent? Am I trustworthy? Do I care about you? Which is another thing. I mean, again, in an era of AI agents, I'm not sure whether the agent caring about the other agent is going to matter. But as long as people are involved, we want to know that our manager cares about us as a person. There's a great quote, which is, people don't care what you know. They want to know that you care about them. So those things are really critical.
And we remember how they made us feel. That always works. Okay, awesome. So as we wrap up, what I want to ask you is, if someone's listening to us and they actually want to ask themselves, what's the one most important next step I should be doing to future-proof my career? What would you have them do?
Yeah, I would say, there's a great expression, which is, if it is to be, it is up to me. And so, and we also, in Dale Carnegie, we have a program called Take Command. And so part of that means that I would be taking the initiative. You can't wait for somebody to do something. So I need to do it myself. I would be looking for training or other kinds of opportunities that I could sign up for myself, or I could get involved in, that will help me. But I'm going to do everything I can to future-proof myself, so that irrespective of what happens, I'm going to be able to add as much value as possible in the work that I'm doing. I mean, that's what I'm going to do, because frankly, I've got to make myself as valuable as possible in an era where AI is becoming more and more prevalent.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And Matt, maybe to kind of bring us to the next phase, we talked about how we shouldn't have as many answers as we used to. So what is the one question you think we should all be asking ourselves these days about the future of work?
I think the first question we should be asking ourselves is, what is the most important problem that I want to solve, either personally or professionally? And how can AI help me solve that problem? And once you have that question and answer, go step by step. Give that framework to ChatGPT and say, give me step-by-step instructions on how to build a tool or application that can help me achieve this. Don't give me step 2 until I tell you step number 1 is done, and dive in. And you'll look back at step 54 and say, I cannot believe how much I've learned, and the application of this to all areas of my life and profession.
Wow, that's really, really interesting. Okay, thank you, Joe Hart and Matt Britton, for joining me today. For more on Human by Design and their work, check out the links in the podcast description. And remember, the future of less work isn't about doing less, it's about doing more of what matters and what only humans can do. And your best people do not work because they have to, or because you tell them to, or because you measure them on it. They work because they want to, because by working for you, they're doing what's important for them in life. Till next time.